Well, hello, friends. So, somebody asked me to talk about LitRPG systems, and I love this topic. LitRPG systems are fantastic. This is going to be a pretty high level overview just because without talking about a specific system, it can be hard to nail down sort of exact thoughts. Because, obviously, LitRPG covers a huge swath of territory. There are a ton of systems. And we want to make sure that we're not saying anything false. And so we have to generalize, but I don't want to, this is just going to be a high level overview. I should have just left it there. That's okay. So we're going to talk about three different kinds of systems. You have stat heavy systems, you have stat light systems, and then you have statless systems. Okay. And these are three broad categories that pretty much cover everything in LitRPG. Now, as with every video I do on this topic, it's important to understand what my qualifications are, why I'm talking about this in the first place, and what I am not trying to say. So, first of all, what are my qualifications? I write LitRPG. I've written a bunch of very successful LitRPG, Battle Mage Farmer, the Titan series, the Tower series, a bunch of other stuff. In fact, I just actually had a new book come out on the 29th of October called Chain of Feathers. It's the first book in the Iron Tyrant series. If you haven't already, you should go check it out. But I write tons of LitRPG. I write a ton of different kinds of systems, though I'll talk about which ones are my favorite and what I'm sort of trending toward. But I've been hanging out in the LitRPG community, and not only do I write LitRPG, but I read a ton of LitRPG because I just love the genre. That's why I write it. So I've talked with a lot of other authors about this, a lot of fans about this. As a fan myself, I am constantly looking for new types of systems to engage with. So what am I not trying to say? I am not trying to tell you what to write. I'm not going to do that. You have to write what you want to write. If you're writing something just because you think it's popular, just because you think that it's going to get you book sales, nobody's going to want to read it. If you don't love it, your reader won't either. I think this is one of the things that gets lost when we talk about write to market, or people ask the question, how should I write LitRPG? What kind of LitRPG do you like? Write that kind of LitRPG. That's it. You like dungeons? Great. Doesn't matter that nobody's buying Dungeon Core. Write Dungeon Core, because there is actually an audience for Dungeon Core. There are people who are buying it, and they might be small at the moment, but they are fervent, and it'll probably come back into fashion. So no matter what you're writing, it doesn't matter if it's in vogue or out of vogue, write what you want to write what you like to read. Okay? I'm not telling you how to write LitRPG. I am just telling you what kinds of LitRPG exist so that you can better understand where you fit in the spectrum. Once again, there are three major system types. You have stat heavy, you have stat light, and then you have statless, which you could also call it systemless, but we'll get into that a little bit more. So let's start with stat heavy. This is where LitRPG really started. People taking things like MMOs, things like D&D, and just converting them wholesale into, a literary genre. This is where you have a lot of crunch, that is a lot of math, and people typically engage with the system in a way that allows them to break things or create exploits because of some sort of loophole. So typically when you're looking at a stat-heavy system, the point is that the numbers go up, right? I have a character sheet with a bunch of stats on it. It might give me my body, it might give me my strength, it might give me agility, it could give me intelligence, it could give me willpower, it could give me magic. Any of these stats that tell me something about who I am. And then, when I, as a character, gain power, the numbers go up first, and then that is reflected in my body. And so typically with stat-heavy systems, you're going to have a hard level up. That means that something is going to happen. I'm going to gain enough experience points. I'm going to hit a milestone, and I'm going to get XP, and that XP is going to flood my character with power, and I can assign that power into stats, or it'll be automatically assigned into stats, and that's where my strength comes from, right? The stat is the most important thing. And so in those kinds of systems, we were more often than not hunting for power-ups, right? Those are the systems that encourage someone to go and grind. These are the kinds of systems that say, okay, as long as I kill enough monsters, I'm going to be able to rank up. So really, it's just a matter of time and how efficient can I be in order to use the system to my benefit. And these are systems that are typically a little bit out of favor with the broader LitRPG market. So one of the things that's important to know about LitRPG is, as a growing genre, there's the core group of people who started reading it initially, and almost all of them started because the systems were these stat-heavy systems that they were very familiar with from video games, from TTRPGs, stuff like that. But as the genre has grown, it's expanded into a lot of other places, a lot of other genres. So you get progression fantasy people coming over, you get epic fantasy people coming over. You have all of these different other genres that are starting to bleed into LitRPG, or really LitRPG is starting to bleed out into those genres. And so as that has happened, you've ended up moving in the direction of a stat-light system. So what's the difference between stat-heavy and stat-light? In stat-heavy, as I said, the number itself is what gives you power, right? Having a strength of 20 gives you that much strength. In a stat-light system, it goes the opposite way. If you have a lot of strength, you end up with a stat that reflects it. And so the power in a character tends to come internally, or even if it's externally, it's applied to the character first and then reflected in the stat sheet. And so this is a good way to think about it. Is the main character hunting the number so that they can have strength? Or are they hunting strength and then that's reflected in the number, right? And I understand that this is a sort of subtle distinction, but it's a very important one. Does the stat sheet reflect what the character intrinsically has, or does the character have something because of what the stat sheet says? Okay, these are two different ways of looking at systems, and systems where the stat sheet reflects what a character already has tend to be light in stats. They tend to be a little bit less crunchy, right? The numbers don't matter as much, because what really matters is what the character has already and what they do. Okay, but in a stat-light system, you still have a window or some way of interpreting what the character already has and representing it to the world. Whether it's only the character who can see it, whether it's somebody else, doesn't matter. These are stories where they still have some sort of number that they can look at to represent who they are, right? So stat light has become more and more popular, in part because of the rise of audiobooks. And this is sort of a weird and interesting fact. At least I think it's interesting. But one of the real challenges for LitRPG with audiobooks is that audiobook narrators have to narrate stat sheets, and they're terribly boring to listen to. They're incredibly confusing because it's just a ton of numbers, and they're just not super interesting. And in crunchy books, in stat-heavy systems, you often need a lot of pop-up windows, a lot of, oh, look, my strength went up. Oh, interesting. I'm going to do some more push-ups. Oh, look, my strength went up again. Well, every single time you have a stat block, the narrator has to read it. And readers started to get really vocal about how annoyed they were about this. And they started skipping through audiobooks. So authors started to do things like, okay, I'm going to move all of my stat sheets over to the back of the chapter so it's easy to skip. I'm going to start adjusting the way that I handle the stats so I don't have to spell them out quite as often. Or just, I'm going to have fewer stats. And that sort of naturally evolved. And at the same time, as a broader audience entered LitRPG, it brought a lot of people who were less interested in the crunch and more interested in the story. They were more interested in what was intrinsically unique about the hero, not how the hero interacted with the system, right? Which was what stat-heavy systems typically favors. So you have this drift into stat light. And really, that's where I hit my stride. I wrote one almost stat-heavy story at the very beginning because I loved VR stories. I loved all of these stat-heavy stories. But as I got into my own, I realized that I'm so bad at math that it was like totally killing my buzz to try and keep track of everything, right? That's just not my style. So I started being like, whatever, I'll just hide all the stats and I'll just sort of hand wave everything. And so I fell into this pattern of writing where the character is more important than the number. And, you know, I want to be fair. In stat-heavy systems, the character is always more important than the number, right? But for my characters in my stories, the window simply reflects who they are. It doesn't assign anything to them. They don't have power because they got a skill on their skill window. They have the skill already, and then it's just reflected in the system. Now, I still do have stats. There are still numbers. They still go up because, you know, numbers going up is very important in LitRPG. But I have a much lighter style when it comes to the systems. And then that brings us to the third and sort of final type of system, which I've played with a little bit, but other people have sort of gone headfirst into, and that is statless systems or systemless LitRPG. Now, you typically find this when someone has a system that assigns no numbers. Instead, it's just a quest system, or there is a special shop, right? And this is still LitRPG. But unlike a regular LitRPG, the character doesn't have a set of stats that determine anything about them. Instead, they just have access to some sort of system that trades them power for something, right? It could be some sort of influence. It could be how happy their citizens are. It could be how mad they make people, right? The system is simply collecting something from them, and in return, it's giving them something back, right? And in these systems, there's no stat to speak of. Instead, all they're doing is farming for something and trading it for something else. And then there are LitRPG where there isn't really a system at all, at least not tied to the MC. Instead, they have a larger system that exists that the MC is just in or is part of. And these books, you know, done well, are often very popular, but they're also sort of on the outskirts of LitRPG. They're books that are sort of flirting with the edge, and that's, you know, they're not really engaging. Some card systems actually are sort of in this place where you collect cards and you build, you know, decks, and those decks give you powers. There aren't stats for you to track or grow or anything like that. But it's still very much a game system, and so it's still very much LitRPG. So that's an overview. You have stat heavy, you have stat light, and then you have statless. That's it. There isn't a right way to do this. There isn't a correct way to write LitRPG. Do you have a system? Awesome. It's probably LitRPG. Whether the system is inside the character, giving them power, whether it is simply reflecting the power they have, or whether it's completely external and they're not really engaging with it at all, doesn't matter. As long as there's the system, as long as the game elements are there, then you're writing LitRPG. Just write the LitRPG that you want to write. And believe me, there are people who want to read it. Everything appeals to different people. Some people like my books because they're light on stats. Other people don't like my books because they're light on stats. And that's okay. Readers are going to like what they like. Authors just need to write what they like.